I'm starting here with a completely newly installed version of CS5, and I'm now going to customize this in order to make it easier for me to work with it, and also to make use as much as possible of the space that I've got here. Every millimeter of space is important to me here on the screen. I also want to get rid of some of the stuff that really doesn't relate to retouching, so what I'm making here is a tailor-made workspace for retouching. I'm also going to load some of my presets, some of my actions and tools here. If you're familiar with CS4, then the changes aren't dramatic, but there are a few little changes, a few little gotchas here, especially on how you save and load the workspaces. First of all, you've got to make sure that you are in the standard screen mode. So toggle the screen mode to full screen mode, pressing F. You see these are now grayed out. You press F again, you get the black full screen mode without the menu. F again, back to your standard screen mode. And now you have access to these buttons. So I've started really here on the Essentials workspace, which is what comes default with Photoshop. I want to get a little bit closer to the workspace that I finally want. So I'm going to click on the Photography, which changes it just a little bit here. The photography preset lets me have the info and the histogram and the navigator at the top. I'm just going to click now on the histogram for a moment there. And the adjustments panel, which was introduced in CS4 along with the masks. As you can see, I've got an adjustment here, and that is reflected here in this dialog box which sits in the panel here. Nowadays you don't have to actually open the dialog box and click OK. It is actually open all the time. Apart from when you then want to see the front end of this panel, you can click on the arrow to see the buttons, which is where you can create a new adjustment layer. For example, if I click here to get the curves, I can then click back to the front end once I've done my work on the curves, clicking here, and you again get access to the buttons there. So anytime you want to switch, it's this arrow. The changes I'm going to make in the interface, I'm going to actually start at the bottom. For the layers panel, I would always want to see the layers. So I'm going to separate the channels and the paths, which I very often use at the same time as the layers, just so I can see them both in one go really. I'm just going to take the channels by its tab, grab it, pull it down till I get a blue line, and then drop it in there. Going to pull that a little bit up on the divider. I like to see the composite channel, all the three channels here in RGB, and an extra mask, and I like to have room for another channel as well, but it depends on how much space you've got really. It's just nice to know when you've actually got an alpha channel or an extra channel here that you can see it at a glance. For the paths, I'm going to do it slightly differently. I'm going to just drag it by the tab again, and then drop it in the same group here in the grey bar there, and putting the channels to the front, because I think that's more often used than the paths, for most of us anyway. I'm probably going to have to come back and adjust this a little bit afterwards. Now I still have very little space here for the layers, so I'm going to get rid of this panel group here at the top. The first thing I'm going to do is get rid of the navigator. So I'm pulling out the navigator and just closing that down. And to give myself even more space, I'm going to look here at the application bar here, which is also something introduced in CS4. The things in the application bar are always doubled up elsewhere, apart from maybe the arranged documents, but you can get them through the menu. So I'm going to pull the tab and pull this into the image, and that makes it shorter and also makes the options bar snap to the top. So I'm pulling this tab and I'm just going to place it so that it's sitting piggyback on top of the options bar. Now the options bar is obviously the options for all the tools, so we're going to come back to that later. You see here there's a slightly different design to the tools, but pretty much the tools are the same. Now we can just push this up to the top and continue our work on designing this new interface. So to get rid of this group here, I'm just going to put the histogram now in a group here in this docking area. A blue line indicates that I can drop it in, and before I drop the info in, and whether I drop the info in or not, I'm going to just change the info slightly because it takes up so much space here. Going to the panel options, I'm just going to untick the show tool hints, which is there, and the document sizes. And when I OK that, you see that became a lot shorter. So you can either keep it here because you're going to use the info to read the values under the cursor quite often, or you can place it here together with the histogram. You can maybe push the info to the top if you like and rearrange it a little bit here, because these are sitting now in groups. You can see the info and the histogram. If you look closely, you can see there that they're sitting together. You've got the clone source sitting here on its own, the history and the action sitting together. Both of those tend to be quite long, so they really benefit from sitting here in this group here, because you can then fly them out like this. I mean, if your histories are 20 or more, you definitely will need the space. I'm going to click back on the history tab there to collapse it. I see quite clearly that there's one thing lacking here, and that's the brushes. I've got the clone source sitting here, so I can go to the menu and get any panel really that isn't available to me here already. So I'm going to go to the brush and just place that in that group, same group as the clone source. So that now flies out here, and you can preview your brushes and make changes to them. Change their dynamics, scattering, noise, for example, airbrush, etc. Always when you click on the tab, that collapses the panel. There's also another way to collapse a panel, and that is to just click on these double arrows here. So now it looks to me as if I've got it more or less right, but the channels has moved a little bit up, so I'm just going to adjust that back a bit there, and that gives me plenty of space here for the layers. I do wish that this adjustments panel was a little bit shorter, but there are some adjustments that actually need all the space they can get here. Now there's one CS5 thing that I haven't looked at yet, and this is the mini bridge. And it's basically a small file browser. It's very helpful when you're working on a project and you really just want to keep opening and closing and saving files in the same place. So browse for files, and then you can browse from here to wherever you want to go. Now you could leave this on photography here and actually switch between these workspaces, but I think it's best to save the workspace. So Window Workspace, and just go to New Workspace. I'm not going to tick any of these buttons here, but I'm going to call it Retouching. Now if you are in the habit of messing about a little bit with your panels, maybe you like to, for example, use the color panel once in a while, which incidentally doubles up with the color picker here, and in the color picker you get a much better overview of what the color consists of. For example, you get the equivalent color in CMYK readings, in HSB, and in lab readings here. You also get here the gamut warning, which is now on, chosen the red color there, and if you click on that it jumps to the nearest color within gamut. You also have the web safe colors here. So I think that this one is much better than the small color panel here, also because you see a slightly larger swatch. And you have, of course, the new floating color pickers, which we're going to pick up on later. Okay, so for example, if you have a color panel floating around here, my little digression, paths there perhaps, masks there. Now you may think that if you then just click back on the retouching, that this will tidy it all up, but it won't. So what you've got to do is go to Window Workspace and reset retouching, and that resets it back to where it was. And that is a little bit of a change from what we had before. There are a few more things that I'd like to do here that are not really part of the saved workspace. Let's go first to the history, and here I'd like to set up a history option that creates a new snapshot when you save, so it automatically creates it. I'm going to click that there and OK that. I'm going to do a little bit of scribbling with a brush on my mask just to do something that it can save, and I can then save the image. And you see here that you get a timed snapshot there. The time is just the time that you actually saved it. And this is very handy if you want to then go back and reference an earlier state just by clicking this box here, using that as a partial rescue tool when you're cloning or doing any other work. And it's also great when you're masking. I'd also like to load some actions. Now I've put my presets in the right place earlier on. So if I go here to the actions, I can then first of all just get rid of the default actions, which I don't use at all. You may, that's absolutely fine. I'm going to actually have to load the actions here because I don't see my actions sitting here. That's probably because I haven't restarted Photoshop since I placed them. So load actions, and I'm in the right place here. I'm going to just load all my actions. They are my user actions. Maybe I shall just show you the path back to get them. If I click on my home first, they are sitting in the library, application support, and of course this is on a Mac, Adobe and CS5, presets and actions. And if I then highlight all of them, I can open them all in one go. Tidy them up a little bit later perhaps if I need to reshuffle the order of them. But here are the groups of sets of actions sitting here. I'm also going to load some tool presets. Now I'm on a brush tool at the moment, and if we look at that, we're on current tool only. That means that I'm only seeing the presets for the actual brush tool. If I untick that, I get all the presets that came with Photoshop. I'd like to actually get rid of these and replace them with my own. I'm first clicking on the current tool only, and then I can load tool presets here, or even better, I can replace tool presets. And I'm going pretty much the same route into the tools folder to my own tool presets here, which I'm also going to give you, and open that. Now these are just the tool presets for the brushes here. Let me collapse that and just choose some other tools and just show you, clicking on this little arrow there, that you have, for example, the golden ratio, 1:1 marquee, 6:7 ratio, and then you have a set size of 6x6 centimeters. You can explore these after you've loaded them, because even though you just loaded them from one tool, they actually load all the tools here. So you can go on any tool here, for example the history brush tool, and find the presets there. The very last thing I want to do is go to edit and keyboard shortcuts. I'm going to just go to filter, and I'm going to go for the noise, which I use a lot. It's alphabetical, so add noise. I'm going to go option command and N. It's going to tell me that that's already in use, and it will be removed from new document with last used settings. Well, that's fine for me, so I'm going to accept that. You've got to make sure that it's something that you're not overwriting a shortcut that you use on a regular basis, or a shortcut that is very useful. So you've got to try and find the ones that are intuitive and work for you, and don't overwrite anything that's important. So okay there. Now finally, if any of you have a little bit of a panic when you don't see the navigator and you don't have the navigator anywhere here, I'm just going to show you how I would navigate just by shortcuts. Command 0 to fit the image on the screen, option Command 0 to view 100%, and to toggle through my screen modes, which you can't do with a navigator anyway. It's just F, and then F again and F again. And you can pull out your workspace here and use the space bar, which turns into the hand tool. So whatever tool you're on, even tricky ones like the magnetic lasso tool, you can use the space bar just to shift yourself around a little bit. Then of course you have the shortcuts for the zoom tool, and you can zoom in, and you can also pan with a hand tool, H for hand tool, and pan across. But of course you can do that with the space bar as well. So that will also let you flick pan it. So Command 0 to get back to full window there. And I'm going to leave you now with a fully tailored, customized workspace with all my favorite tools, my actions, so that I can work without having any clutter, without having panels that I don't use at all, and tool presets that I don't use either. So everything is customized to the way that I work.